Okay. New day, new thoughts. It's 8:30 a.m. here in the U.S. of A. Most people are getting up. I can hear the hustle and bustle, and a lot of cars going around. A lot of people heading into work. But for me, things are a little different because I don't have a job, and that's okay with me. For now, we'll see, man. I realize, man, let's see. I'm feeling a little nervous, anxious still. Particularly, this is my third day now back in the US, and I've established this great habit, or I think it's a great habit. I think my mind sometimes tells me it's not a great habit and criticizes me for it, telling me that I'm wasting my time. I basically average out to 2 hours per video for the past 2 days, and so my mind kind of criticized me, saying you're wasting your time, this is the problem, all you do is think. Oh my god. Jesus Christ. Oh. Oh man. Big dojis. It's true, I do think a lot, but is it a waste of time is the real question there, right? If I wasn't doing this video and I wasn't saying my thoughts out loud, that thought that these are a waste of time would have just sunk into my head. I would have accepted it. If I wasn't aware of it, and I didn't have the awareness of it, and I didn't separate the thought from me as a person, what I want to choose with my own conscience, then I would have just accepted it. Like, oh, it's true. I'm wasting my time. I'm so dumb. I should feel ashamed. What am I doing? I don't have a job. All these people are going to work. Blah. You know? And, yeah, I guess it's still a little nerve-wracking. Not too bad. I mean, obviously the thing about this is that I constantly keep improving and pushing my comfort zone. Like even right now, the past 2 days, I would walk to the park before I started recording, but now I'm just walking down residential streets and talking, and as I passed someone back there, I was feeling a little anxious, a little nervous. Dude's kind of walking all he looked kind of, I don't know, stern and maybe angry or unhappy or something. Very serious looking. And so, I feel like the thing is sometimes you might not realize it, but at least for me, I notice that I automatically react, or sometimes I would automatically react to my environment. I guess everyone does, but what I mean is more so emotionally. If I'm walking down the street and there's a group of I don't know, if I walk into a building and there's 5 customers in there and they're all silent and they're all really serious looking, or all look unhappy or something, the automatic reaction is going to be to kind of tone it down and stop talking, also be silent. Imagine walking to a post office, right? And everyone's silent. Maybe some people are a little angry, a little groggy. We kind of just automatically adapt to the environment. And I feel I don't want to adapt to my environment. In the sense that I want to be intentional and mindful of when I adapt to my environment. Because I feel the thing is, there are times when I'm like, just having a jolly good time. I'm just chilling, I'm just being myself, being happy, being proud of who I am, loving myself. And I'm starting to kind of get a taste of this again, now that I am starting to feel all these things. But, like I notice I'll like walk down the street, and if there's someone that's like really like unhappy looking and serious looking, I'll notice that I'll like automatically tone it down. And I feel like over time, holy moly, there's so many cars. I feel like over time this is kind of what's fucked me. Like, I feel like I've toned myself down, like, for the sake of the people around me. Because, like, I feel like there's been times where people are uncomfortable with, like, my energy, I guess. I don't know. Let me think about how I can phrase this. My mind's telling me I'm being egotistical, which is a very classic one. I'm being egotistical, and that I shouldn't like I don't know, I guess it's more like pride. In reality, I think it's pride. In my mind, I think it's kind of automatically like framed as ego, and this is a problem I've been tackling for a while, or at least something I want to change. Not necessarily a problem, it is what it is. And what I've come to realize too about ego, I think in the past I kind of demonized my ego, called it my demons and shit. But the thing is, like, our ego isn't inherently bad. Like, in its essence, the ego is there to protect ourselves. Damn, my fucking phone ran out of storage again. An age-old problem. But what I was getting at is, like, our ego is not, like, inherently bad. It's kind of like, or like fear. Like, it's not inherently bad. It kind of protects us and is meant to help us. But the thing is, like, if we're not aware of it, we'll automatically kind of internalize the things around us, the things people say, the expectations people have, the I don't know, the things you hear maybe on social media or on TV, or from your family, from your friends, from your colleagues, from your peers. And I feel like that's essentially what most of our, or from my observation, I feel like that's what our egos tend to become. We, without realizing it, kind of passively, or maybe not, maybe it's just me, who fucking knows? maybe it's just me. I think I'll try to frame things more from my experience and my perspective. But for myself, I realized that my ego basically internalized all the really toxic shit I was around for many years, from a really toxic friend group where we had a really toxic dynamic. And I feel like that was really the start of the end in, like, me being who I was and who I wanted to be. And I feel like the passiveness that I mean, in reality, that I sort of passively chose to be passive. And I was in this friend group where once COVID hit, dynamics were getting really toxic. People were making personal attacks, just being really shitty, really vulgar, and just, it was fucked. And I sort of knew it was wrong. Something was wrong with it. But I didn't quite grasp that at the time. I kind of just suppressed my feelings of uncomfortability and feelings that, like, something was off about this, something wasn't right about this. And over time, I basically, like, allowed myself to lose who I was. And I frame it that way as like allowed myself because, I can't control what happens around me. I can't control other people. I can only control how I respond. And at the same time, I don't blame myself. I wouldn't have learned these incredible lessons if it wasn't for these mistakes I made. But I certainly fucked myself staying in that friend group for as long as I stayed. I mean, I blocked a lot of them and gotten out of that friend group for the most part. But, the effects remain, the effects lingered. And I think that's the thing. Like, even if the people that influence us and the voices that we have internalized are long gone, for example, it's been years since I've talked to some of those people, but that internalized voice, the ego, the way that I talk to myself, my inner dialogue, is still very much, not anymore, because for the past few months especially, I've been doing hella great work, in part by doing this, which my mind sometimes still tells me is bad, but no, ego, it's not bad, sorry. And sometimes I think it's just a matter of protecting ourselves. Like, if you have a very strong fear of abandonment, your ego might say really shitty things to try and get you out of that situation, to basically self-sabotage a relationship before you can be abandoned. Because it's easier to be hurt by someone you don't like than by someone you love. So sometimes, there's this phenomenon where typically, I think, without being aware of it, we self-sabotage our relationships out of fear that they would sabotage us first, or that we would feel immense suffering and pain if we lost our partner in a relationship, someone we loved, because it sucks. And I feel like that's something I've experienced, I think, going from my first romantic, I guess it wasn't officially a relationship, but my first romantic, period, definitely came out of that with a lot of fucked up conclusions about myself, and that came in to really affect me and fuck me up in my next relationship. Worked through a lot of it, but then COVID hit, and by the end, I fucked myself again. Not I fucked myself, but I let myself get fucked. There's quite a difference, when I frame things, the reason I love to frame things as I let myself is because we have power in these situations, if I have a friend that's extremely toxic, I can't change him per se, but I can change how I react and how I respond to their behavior. I can set boundaries. I can straight up just end the friendship, leave them, not spend time around them. And these are kind of some of the things that I found myself automatically doing without realizing it. And I realized I'd built up a lot of resentment and anger and stuff. And that resentment and anger kind of serves the purpose of protecting ourselves, right? When we're angry, it's easier to act. We feel more empowered and, fierce. And, I would notice that that's kind of what ended up happening anyways. My ego protected me. My mind protected me automatically in that sense. But, it took a very long time to sort of become aware of that whole process and to realize I've done the right action steps to get rid of those negative influences that were fucking up my inner dialogue and the way I saw the world, the way I perceived the world, the way I saw myself and saw others. I got rid of the source, at least in terms of the people around me, I think the other thing that fucks me up is social media. Probably not just me, probably fucks a lot of us up is social media. I feel like I remember there was a long period of time where, I'd see something on like Instagram and I'd be like, oh, like that's so, like such a wholesome, cheeky post, like, oh, that's funny stuff. And then I'd be like, oh, let me check what's going on down here in the comment section. Let's see what people are saying. And then I would like always be disappointed in what I saw and just like lose faith in humanity. And I realized like just recently, like just in the past few days, I'm kind of having this realization that I've had this sort of habit where like I feel like I'm responsible or have this duty to like seek truth in a sense. At least that's the way it kind of frames it. Like I wanted to see what people truly thought, let's say. But the thing about that is like it's a very skewed, in the way that I actually went about it, it's very skewed. In part that's biological, because like when we see really negative comments, like our mind is trained to pick up on threats. And I mean our ego in a way is there to protect us from threats. Sometimes that can manifest in like, I don't know, if you're super narcissistic or something and like very competitive and like everyone else is a threat, then like, comparison is a thief of joy. You'll probably be miserable comparing to everyone. But anyways, like ego or mind, it's trying to protect us. And I lost my train of thought. That's what I did. I lost my train of thought. Because my mind and ego are probably trying to protect me. And what are they trying to protect me from? They're trying to protect me from fear of judgment, fear of criticism, fear of failure. And it's funny because I've made immense progress in building awareness of these fears. And it's been working. It's been working greatly. I've been able to catch myself super often now and sort of differentiate between the automatic thoughts that my ego's hitting me or my mind's hitting me, and then, just observe it, accept it, don't battle it, but choose how I respond to it. And for me, I suppose I try to be very intentional about how I respond based on like who I want to be. Who do I want to be? And, for example, like with what I'm talking about with like toxicity and like a very negative inner dialogue, I know that's something I don't want. I know something that's really shitty. Oh my God, there's a bird attacking a squirrel. Damn, what the fuck? I don't think I caught it, but that bird was like swooping down and like pecking at that squirrel. That was crazy. Maybe it'll peck at me next. You know what? That's a perfect analogy right there. That squirrel is us. That squirrel was running away, running up the tree. It was getting chased by this freaking bird that was attacking it. And now that I think about it, it's symbolic. Not inherently, but I choose what symbols mean. I choose what meaning means. I'm going to choose what this means. And what this means is it's an analogy for the ego and our mind, our conscious mind, where if you're not in control of your ego will act like that bird, and your ego will just keep swooping down and pecking at you, hurting you, harming you, not serving you, and you'll be like that squirrel. You're just running away, trying to get away from your ego. But the reality is, if we realize that all we need to do is observe the ego and be aware of when it's hurting us and why it's hurting us and how that came to be, if we're that squirrel and we turn around and we look at the bird and we say, nah, fuck that, get the fuck away from me. I'm gonna fight you, homie. I don't know. Maybe the analogy breaks up. Maybe the analogy breaks apart a bit. But what I'm getting at is, if you observe. So essentially, if you observe your ego that's like being negative, being harmful, not really serving you anymore in your life, you can't change that until you're aware of it. You have to be aware that there's a change that needs to be made. Because once you realize there's a change that needs to be made, you'll want to change. Not out of willpower, not out of brute force, but out of a genuine desire to be who you want to be. And for me, I don't want to be someone that shits on myself and that lives life in fear. I don't want to live life based on other people's expectations. I don't want to live life based on what other people want from me, what other people think of me, who other people believe I am. And one of the strangest things about being back in the US now after, it's been like 4 months this time. I was traveling in Asia. And I feel like I've seen and done and experienced so much and had so many realizations and just new perspectives, new awareness. And I feel like it's a strange thing because I'll like come back and it feels like nothing really has changed here. Which I guess is sort of typical. And maybe there's nothing wrong with that. I think at any point in our lives, most people like to settle down and have that stability. But yeah, I'm not sure what really would be my desire. I really love traveling, but I've also realized that we soon tire of living only for ourselves. If I travel just for myself, just for my own pleasure, I've realized firsthand that it gets boring very quick. It gets numbing very quick. I get desensitized. And, I think there's some aspect of like shame and guilt for feeling that way, which just makes things worse. And I've experienced this cycle with video games where I think I shouldn't play video games because I don't know, they fucked me up. I use them to escape a lot. And so I've realized that in general over the years, the past 4-5 years of my life, I tended to be extremely idealistic, and I would also just brute force things, just do things out of willpower. But that kind of just fucked me, because you can only willpower and brute force something for so long, and it's extremely draining. And if you keep failing to meet your really high expectations, you're gonna feel worse. You're gonna perform worse. You're gonna feel like you need even higher expectations, and you just perpetuate the cycle. And I feel like I still feel some of these resistances, some of these like self-criticism, self-bashing, if you will, in regards to doing things that in the past I set an ideal not to do. For example, like not to play video games, because in the past I would not play to enjoy but to escape. And so I felt like, if I just didn't play video games all day every day to escape, then my life would have been better. Blah, 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 right? And not sure what other people's inner voice are. I imagine not too different from mine. At least many people probably have a very critical and negative inner dialogue, demon talk, as I like to call it sometimes. And I feel that there are probably a lot of people like me who have lived in by setting very idealistic standards for themselves, and then down the line they realize, or maybe they don't realize, maybe they're realizing right now as they're watching this, that there's something they do or have done or are doing that is a really high expectation that's actually just fucking themselves over. And like I've been playing some video games lately, or the past couple of days now that I'm back, and I think some of this is kind of resurfacing and coming out to play. And yeah, like I think what I've been doing for the past like month and a half, like a lot of it is sort of like this equation or this cycle, a good cycle, healthy and productive and nurturing cycle, where I sort of intentionally, and I voice my thoughts, I gain awareness of how I feel and what I think about why that is, and typically realize that it comes from an emotional problem. It's something, I think the thing is, a lot of times our ego is really like what's the word? Derivative? No. Emotions are the derivative of the ego? Maybe it's the other way away. Maybe it's the other way around. The ego is a derivative of our emotions. In the sense that, like, I notice that most of my problems aren't intellectual problems. And that's the problem with, like, overthinking for myself, is, like, it's a beautiful trap that I've fallen for. And that my mind has succumbed to for so long, until recently, where I'm really bad, or I feel that I'm bad at feeling my emotions, being aware of my emotions, expressing emotions. Not as much anymore. I'm actually quite the beast now. But that was the case for a very long time. And the thing about that is, like, when we have an emotional problem that's being dealt with in a reason or logic like framework, we just end up running circles. We never actually create like a fundamental change, or like the shift we need to change. And like for myself, like, and in my observations, I realized that a lot of my problems have nothing to do with like thinking about how to respond. Because if you're just purely in thought, like, you probably won't respond at all. And that's the thing I've realized, and why I do these videos and why I love to do them. Like my mind is telling me like, oh, like I'm thinking too much, which I am thinking a lot. I am saying a lot. But I think it's always been helpful. Like, I've never come out of one of these videos and been like, wow, like, that was a waste of my time. I regret that. Like, the thought pops up in my head, but I certainly never believe it. I certainly never end a day believing that I've wasted my time or wasted my energy filming one of these videos. And I think the thing is, like, there's a voice of negativity in regards to doing these videos, as I mentioned at the start of this video, where it sort of like shits on me for doing this. Although, the beautiful thing is that as I've been aware of my thoughts, and how have I been aware of my thoughts? I've done that by voicing them and putting them on camera, or even just saying it out loud, because then I hear the words that are coming in my mind, and that's how you realize, like, wait, what the fuck? you realize that like the things that you might have just that might have popped into your head and that you might have just accepted and believed and like responded to and like acted on, like those things make no sense. And maybe they're really negative, maybe they're really critical thoughts that lead to really critical actions, things that sort of just dig you deeper and deeper into a hole. And that's certainly how I've realized this whole thing, where I'm essentially, wow, I just had a really weird intrusive thought. I just had a thought of like, oh my gosh, like my mind just like feared, like, wait, what if like some of the friends I have blocked, like find out, oh my god, what a crazy thought. What if some of my friends that I have blocked find out that I'm filming these videos, and they find out where I'm filming them, and they come to harass me when I'm here and filming it? Oh my gosh, this is a perfect example. Like, how fucking crazy is that? Like, it's such a crazy thought that's so far removed from reality, like what would probably ever happen. But I mean, it just popped up anyways. And if I wasn't talking out loud, if I was just going about my day and I was just on autopilot, that thought would have hit, and I probably would have felt the feelings. I sort of felt a bit of the feelings, a bit of like a spike in anxiety, nervousness. I was a little more on high alert. I looked around for a second. But like, if I wasn't voicing my thoughts and aware of what I was thinking, and I was just here normally, like I might have like full-fledged just like listened to that thought and like maybe ruminated on it, or like, I don't know, maybe I would have started feeling more anxious or self-conscious, self-aware, afraid of the people around me, cautious of people around me, less secure and confident in speaking my voice with people around me. Like all these things, like every moment matters. And if we're not aware of what we're doing, we're probably gonna do what's automatic, what has been habitualized. And what I've found for myself and in my observations of others is that a lot of time the things that we have habitualized stem from an emotional problem, an emotional experience, something that really fucked us up and really made us feel uncomfortable or really unpleasant or really hurt, feelings of a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, heartbreak, maybe, whatever. I've noticed that like at the core of like a lot of my inner dialogue, it actually has a lot more to do with those deeper feelings and those deeper emotions that have gone unprocessed and that are still suppressed and bottled up. And that was something I did a lot actually in like high school. I remember I would bottle up my feelings super hard. I would just fill bottles and bottles of feelings, negative feelings. And, you know, in part, like that led to me starting to work out and having like a more positive outlet for my negative emotions, which is certainly a great step. I'm very proud of myself for that. My life would have been extremely different just if I didn't do that one thing. And that's the thing, like, time, you know, it's kind of like with finance and shit. Like, time is just such a force of change. Like, you don't need to make huge changes to create huge... Wait, hold on. You don't need to tackle a huge problem with huge change. Like, time will work everything out. If you just improve ever so slightly every day, like, and I feel like that's kind of what I've been but like what I've been realizing and sort of witnessing and like sort of being a testament to is like, I feel that, it's not actually that insane what I'm doing. Like, for the most part, what I do is really just voice out my thoughts like once a day. Apart from that, a lot of it has to do with pushing my comfort zone. And then, I guess essentially the system I have is voicing my thoughts, realizing what I think and why, realizing how I feel and why. And then I figure out, okay, there's something here, like there's some experience, something negative that's happened to me in my life, and that is unprocessed, that is bottled up. I want to tackle that because I know that it's not a mental problem, it's an emotional problem, and an emotional problem requires an emotional solution. So essentially what I do is I intentionally try to trigger that emotion. For example, if I'm extremely socially anxious, I can do a little small action to help me trigger that anxiety and let myself feel it out, let myself process it, and expose myself to it. It's like exposure therapy, essentially, is my approach. And then, I take some action that triggers those feelings, those emotions. I process it. I observe my mind, because certain things will happen. My mind will get triggered. I'll start feeling more afraid or fearful or worried. And I'll just kind of notice, what am I thinking? And that's the thing, like, what I've come to realize is everything we need to know is within ourselves. Our thoughts tell us everything. Of course, we can't control our thoughts for the most part. And a lot of times we do have like random ass thoughts. But like the thoughts I'm kind of thinking of is more so, I guess like let me think about this. So I believe we are not our thoughts. We can't control the thoughts that pop in our head. We can control the thoughts when we're like consciously and actively thinking about something. But of the thoughts that pop into our head, while some of them might be really like exceptions and extreme, it might just be random ass crazy shit. Like maybe like a thought like, oh, like I wonder what would happen if like I stick a fork in an outlet, but I'm holding onto the fork with a wooden stick that's hooked on the fork so that I'm not in contact with the metal. What would happen? Something like crazy. I made that up. It's not a real thought. I guess it kind of is, because it's a thought that I thought of. But, sometimes we go about our day and we just have like a really random, insane thought that pops in our head. Those type of thoughts. There are those exceptions that are just completely like irrational and just way out there. But most of the thoughts that pop in our head are not random, I believe. And I believe most of them are actually extremely indicative of what we believe, what we feel, and about our actions, our habits, our behaviors. And I think our thoughts are extremely indicative of, or I guess I just said that already. Like if you have very automated habits, automated behaviors, your thoughts are going to be in alignment with those habits. And it's sort of like this like, what the heck? It's sort of this like process of building awareness. Like it starts with your thoughts, or for me, like it started with my thoughts, then it goes to my feelings, then it goes into action. How do I want to respond? I respond by trying to trigger more thoughts and trigger more feelings, and then I observe it again, and then I continue the cycle. And what's kind of ends up happening is like I keep digging, like resurfacing more and more like suppressed and like automated like like feelings, habits, beliefs about myself, about the world. Like a lot of the things I've worked through are like, and I'm still working through, I suppose. Feeling like very distrusting of humans, very pessimistic about human nature, very negative about the world, very uncomfortable or distrusting around my friends, very critical and judgmental and doubtful of myself or the people around me. All these sorts of things. It's kind of what I've been tackling for a very long time. And I think the most progress has come recently when I've essentially essentially my full-time job right now, I feel, is becoming the person I want to be. And when I put it that way, that sounds pretty fucking sick. In that sense, I gladly love to be unemployed. And I feel like this is one of those things that there's a lot of stigma and judgment around. Like a lot of people, obviously, especially in the US, look down on people who are unemployed or judge people who are unemployed. And that's kind of what makes it a harder thing to say and to admit to. And I kind of leverage all these pre-existing notions and judgments that people probably would have or might have. In a way, I've realized I can intentionally leverage them to make myself uncomfortable, make myself feel uncomfortable, and process that discomfort and decide who I want to be despite the discomfort, right? So for example, I'm unemployed, right? Me saying that feels kind of uncomfortable. I feel a little embarrassed. I feel like I should be ashamed or guilty or just feel bad, because that's kind of the societal hallmark of the US is work, everyone just works. And I feel like this is something that I feel is fundamentally I guess it depends on the type of work, but I feel like there's a large portion of people who live very unhappy lives based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what happiness is. And I feel like work, if not intentional, or if not something fulfilling to the individual, it can end up being something that sort of just entraps and ensnares you and leads to a life of unhappiness, I suppose. And I feel like excuse me, I feel like I do have, it's hard. It's hard to say I'm unemployed and I have no idea what I'm going to do next with my life. I have no plan of getting a job right now. And it's tough because if I don't have the self-conviction and the courage and the self-awareness and the self-empowerment and decisiveness, composure, if I don't have these things to be able to not admit, but to believe and stand firm in my belief that what I am doing right now is in my interests and I am choosing to do it. It's very risky. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where I'll end up, but I am choosing to do it because I choose to trust that it's the right thing for me. It's the right thing for, I think in doing it for myself and documenting it and recording it and putting it out into the world, I believe that it will be a very fulfilling and rewarding thing, because I am trusting and I believe that in the future I will highly reap the benefits of what I'm doing now, of this decision to forego work, forego distraction, and focus and be intentional on who it is that I want to be, what it is that I want to do, and in finding my way to get there. I think that's sort of at the core of what this is. And it's a lonely journey. It's a tough journey. It kind of sucks. And I feel like, I suppose I feel misunderstood. And I suppose I feel like, oh my gosh, like even amongst my friends, like I feel like I'm not really understood. And, part of that is I feel a reluctance to try to make myself understood because of what I've habitualized, of what my friend group dynamic was like in the past, where there was very little effort to understand each other and to really like be vulnerable, and like a lot of these things that I feel a friendship should be, right? Like I want friends who are supportive, who are like understanding, who are like positive role models, who care about like themselves, who care about the people around them, care about the world, care about making a change. And it's not to like set like these extremely high standards and like, oh, if they're not this, like, then they're not my friends. I feel like you kind of hear that, where it's like, oh, like if your social circle isn't like waking up at 5 a.m. and like talking about like blah blah blah, like getting you friends or something. Yeah. I'm certainly not in that camp. I feel like, I would be hurt if my friends felt that way and abandoned me like at some point over the years for no reason, just because they felt that like I wasn't up to their standards. Like I feel it's kind of like I don't feel that it's like it's a very productive thing to do, because in a sense, like, you're sort of, in a way, you're sort of building up an inability to reconcile with differing views, differing perspectives, differing values. And it's kind of like a relationship. Like a lot of people feel, you kind of hear a lot of these like advice about relationships that is kind of just like fundamentally broken and wrong. I feel. And like, one of my favorite quotes for relationships is, it's not a great relationship. A great relationship doesn't depend on how compatible you are, but it depends on how well you can reconcile differences in your compatibility. I don't know if I really explained that well. I definitely didn't quote it right. But what I'm sort of getting at is like, a lot of times we think we need a relationship where we're the same, where the other person is the same, where they're a reflection of us, which is just fundamentally just such a, in a way, narcissistic. Narcissistic, like, method or like strategy. But in reality, like, what makes a relationship successful is not how similar you are, but how well you can reconcile your differences. And I feel like with like the whole like, I think there's a lot of talk and like word and like hearsay. I don't know, just a lot of the type of shit you hear on social media. I mean, it's a fucking wild west, man. it's a shit show. It's a chaos. It's chaos out there. And I guess that's part of why, like, I finally reached the point where, like, like, I don't want to just sit back and, like, watch all this chaos and see all these things play out that, like, I feel that, like, I've noticed, like, it's fundamentally broken. And, like, I feel like it doesn't work and it's not the right thing. It's not the right approach. I feel like for a long time I was very afraid of using my voice and sharing my perspectives. In a way, that's been very good, very helpful for myself, because it's allowed me to observe the world around me and really understand people and human nature and all these things. And, for months of my life, it was because I was fearful of sharing my voice, sharing my perspective. But luckily, now, in the direction I'm heading in, I'm sort of reaching this, like, power spike. This power spike where, like, I'm learning to use my voice. I'm learning to be comfortable with using my voice and not being afraid to say the things I want to say, the things I believe, the way I see things. And, I'm going to try my best, not because I think I should, not because I'm afraid of others, because I feel it's the right thing. I am trying my best and want to continue to try my best to use my voice in a very responsible and a very careful, very thoughtful, very intentional and mindful way, and in a way that's fair and open-minded and non-judgmental, because I feel like a lot of times what gets in the way of true dialogue, of, like, great communication, is acting based on the feelings, the emotions we have. Like, in a relationship, I think it happens all the time. We act out of our frustration, and then we just end up making things way worse. And one of the greatest strategies I've learned for my relationship, and I think has really, really saved my relationship, is when you're extremely frustrated, like, you can't change how you feel, you can't change how they feel, but you can change how you respond. And if you're extremely frustrated, if they're extremely frustrated, and they try to engage during that frustration, it's going to make things way worse. And, I realize, like, the best thing I can do is focus on myself, focus on my actions, communicate how I feel, how I understand the situation. And, something as simple as, like, hey, like, I'm feeling really frustrated. I want us to reconcile and to talk about this because I love you and we deserve to have that understanding and that collaboration. But I'm in a very frustrated state of mind. I don't trust myself not to escalate the situation. Neither of us deserve that. So I'm going to take some space until I feel better, and I'm going to check in as soon as I can. No expectations on your end. Something like that. Like, it's been fucking hard to, like, get to that point. And it was a lot of trial and error. But that's sort of the thing, like, just because something isn't to our standard, or just because we don't like something, or we feel like something is wrong, we can actually create very fundamental and important change through how we approach the situation. When we change, the other side is forced to respond, right? And, it's kind of like, I like to think of it like an equation. Like, if you add something to one side of the equation, like, the other side is going to have to respond as to how it wants to react and interact with that change. And so, I feel like a lot of the focus in the modern world is on how to change other people and focusing on how to change the behaviors, the beliefs, the thoughts of others. But I feel that we tend to act on our emotion and our frustration and our hate. And it's not that it's wrong to feel those things, to feel emotion, to feel hate, to feel whatever. It's not that it's wrong to feel it, but it's that fundamentally if we want to have that dialogue, if we want to create the change that is causing those emotions, you actually kind of have to be able to not reel those in, but process them, be aware of them, be capable of expressing them, but also be capable of listening and understanding the other side. And I've been talking about this quite a bit, but like everyone feels, oh God, it feels as though everyone wants to be understood, but few people want to understand. And that creates this fundamental problem where no progress is made because it's no longer a dialogue, it's a screaming match, it's an argument, it's a debate, where both sides have their mind made up, and neither of them is willing to listen or budge at all. And I feel like for a very long time, I would feel afraid of conflict, and I would realize this fundamental trap, and I could observe and see that so many people were falling for it. But I would be afraid to like voice myself, and it's very hard to approach a situation where people are really heated or really angry. Like you can imagine, like, I don't know, maybe this isn't even imagining. Maybe some people have parents that like argued a lot. And, as a kid, like you hear them arguing and they're really heated, they're really frustrated. And you feel really scared, you feel afraid. You want to help, but like maybe in the past, like you've tried to step in and they like let it out on you, right? And that's like the kind of thing where it's like really tough, because like when people are really angry and really emotional, it's very hard to get to them, to get to their head. And in a way, the focus is more so to try to help them bring down their emotional level or process that emotional level so that they sort of like calm down and relax and are in a state of being capable of listening and having like a dialogue. And that's why like a lot of times like like in a relationship, if both people are really frustrated, you shouldn't, or I think you don't want to actually converse until you're both ready to. And that's going to take time. If you're really angry, really heated, trying to talk about it is going to make things a world's worse. And for myself, what I found is what I actually want to do and what actually works really effectively is distancing myself from that situation, exiting the situation so that we don't escalate things, being communicative as to why I'm doing it, and communicating that I am doing that, not just leave the room, but like try and communicate that I need some space, I'm feeling really frustrated, blah, blah, blah. And it's a beautiful thing, because like what I found is that if you sort of like, it goes perfectly into this whole equation thing I'm talking about. And I've seen it in so many other areas of life where like, even if someone comes at you in a really mean and unfair way, if you approach them intentionally and like you don't like respond with the same energy and you stay like respectful, like for example, there was this one time on college campus, I was in like a political club, the Andrew Yang Club. And there was this guy that was walking by, like me and a friend were like tabling, we were like doing flyers and stuff. And this guy walked by, he was like, fuck Andrew Yang. Like, fuck Andrew Yang, like blah, blah, something. And my friend, man, he handled it so well. He was like, yo, dude, come talk to us. Like, let's have a talk about it. And he came by, and he was still like pretty mad. He was like, yo, dude, like, fuck Andrew Yang, like, blah, blah, like blah, blah. And he was like, oh, like, why do you feel that way? Like, what do you think about him? And like, he started explaining himself, and like, this beautiful thing happened. Like, I was pretty like scared. I was pretty fearful. I was feeling pretty intense emotion. Um, it's hard to be around someone that's so like riled up and amplified and like angry. But he came up, and my friend just started chatting with him and trying to get his perspective and understanding. And like he calmed down, he like really toned down and was like, "Yo, like he apologized. He's like, yo, like I'm sorry, like I feel really strongly about it, like, and like, what I find, and like with this guy, his case was like he had a really rough childhood where he was like in the foster care system or something, and like basically like his mom like got fucked over by like a program shift, and like I don't know, like what do they call it? Haven't been in the U.S. for a long ass time. I forget how everything works here. Social, not security, social welfare. Like his mom got fucked over by it, so he was like had some strong position, strong stance, strong views, strong emotions regarding this certain topic. And that's the thing. That's what I've come to find. Like even the people who are the most like angry and like ignorant and like bigoted and like whatever, I guess that's kind of the word people use, ignorant, like bigoted, but I feel like they have a very negative connotation. But what I feel I've found by sort of observing people and like observing human nature and like just in my own experiences and interactions is like even the worst of people, the people who lash out and are very hateful, very like just so much hate in their heart, like it tends to be a response to something that happened in their life that was really shitty. And it's not to say that it's an excuse. It's to say that it's understandable. If I was in their shoes, I probably would have wanted to react in the same way. And I feel that's the tough part these days. I feel that many people don't want to be empathetic. And it's kind of like the self-perpetuating cycle where like as people stop being empathetic, they treat others worse and they're more mean to others. And as people are being treated worse and people are being mean to them, they're like, wow, like fuck this, like I'm not gonna be empathetic, like this guy's a blah blah blah, like fuck him, like I'm so angry, like maybe it's conscious, maybe it's unconscious, but they're gonna be like, I'm gonna go fucking do this to someone else. Probably an unconscious thing, I think, most of the time. But then it kind of just perpetuates the cycle where like, that's how all change happens. Like we're all an individual, but we have so much influence because what we do as people observe that, they're gonna have an idea of what the world is like, what human nature is like, what society is like, what their country is like, what their people are like, what their culture is like, whatever. Like it all adds up, and it's kind of like this huge like tug of war or like ripple effect. It's like a huge ocean where like there's all these ripples like fighting for like dominance or like fighting for like impact. I don't know, like I feel like I hear a lot of people talk about the ripple effect, and I feel like it is a good analogy. Like all it takes is that one ripple, and like if people resonate and they ripple off of that, like it becomes a huge force of change. And I feel like at its essence, that's how all change comes about. All grand change in this world, it starts with one person. It has to start with one person. I mean, even like governments, like it's really just a huge organization of a fuck ton of individuals. And I used to work, so my mind, all right, let me acknowledge something real quick. My mind is feeling a little nervous, a little anxious to bring up this fact, because I feel that this is one of those things that I feel that many people who are very emotionally charged about a situation or oh my gosh, hyper, or about a topic or about a I don't know, maybe a group or an organization. For example, in my case, what I'm referring to is like a lot of people are like in the US like hate the cops. Or at least that's like what you hear is very vocalized like on social media and stuff. I feel like in person people are a lot more tame because there's consequences to their actions in person. But there's a lot of people that hate the police as like an institution, as an organization, and they'll literally like hate anyone who is a police officer and like quote unquote like upholds the system, right? And like I feel like there's fundamental parts of this argument or this view that is just very wrong, I guess, in the sense that like anytime that we generalize like a whole group under like one umbrella, I mean that's sort of what leads to like, it's so ironic, it's so ironic, at the surface ironic, at its core really sad and really tragic, because like it's really just another perpetuating cycle. For example, in this case, a lot of this had to do with like George Floyd and like racism against black people. And like the thing is, like, let's say let me think about how to say this. For the sake of argument, I'm not going to take like a stance, but for the sake of argument, let's assume that there is a lot of racism towards black people. If that's the case, and a lot of people are really angry about that, and then they go on to say, hey, like, fuck all the police, like all cops are bastards, like blah blah, all police are terrible. Like, it's so ironic because that's the same mentality that led to the core root issue in the first place, which is that a lot of people hate black people for being black, or have prejudice or discriminate against black people for being black. They've generalized the whole group and created these notions, these ideas of who they are as a whole and as people. And this phenomenon just perpetuates. Like, if they hate all black people and then you hate all cops, and then there's a fuck ton of cops that like don't hate black people and have nothing to do with it, but you're demonizing them and like making them feel shitty just for being a cop, even though like they're doing a lot of really great things and they're really great people. Like, a lot of times, like, what I feel is like some people will choose to become the thing that you tell them they are. Like, if you tell someone they're a fucking like asshole, like horrible, horrendous person, like it's gonna feel very unfair when they're not. And like out of like anger and like frustration for like being labeled and identified as something you're not, it feels very shitty, it feels very unfair. So what might end up happening is, out of those frustrations, they give up on being a good person and they become the very thing you want them not to be. And that's kind of like the whole cycle that I feel like just constantly happens, especially like here in the US, where like freedom of speech, like people can say very like people can speak their mind, and I love freedom of speech. I think it's a little tough to like be around the intensity of the things people will say sometimes, and I think that's where I've struggled a lot in my personal life and why I felt so uncomfortable voicing my thoughts, because I feel that like a lot of times people would be very like amplified and like emotionally charged, and it'd be very difficult to actually like have a conversation where it's fair and they're not like drowning me out. And I've learned a lot since then. And when I hung out with my friends a couple of days ago, I finally sort of attempted a political/religious conversation, which I guess like always happens at some point in the US in like a social gathering setting. But I tackled it in such a different way, and I was so proud of myself for how different the dynamic was and the outcomes were, because I felt that I changed a lot, but I felt that my friends hadn't changed a lot. I felt like they still held a lot of like, I think this is just something I feel about the US in general, where like it's become pretty common for like a lot of people to feel very, I don't know if they feel, I guess, let's see, to make comments that are very like judgmental or like discriminatory or like sort of insensitive. Like, I feel like there's this phenomenon in the US where like people purposely want to like rile up others and like hate on others and make people angry, and it kind of just becomes a cycle where like people respond by doing the same back, and it's an ugly thing. And I think it's one of the most depressing parts of the US, and just seeing things go to shit, and just seeing all these ways in which we like essentially do it to ourselves. And I feel like it's only until recently that I finally feel like, okay, like I have my understanding of the situation, I have my beliefs, my thoughts about everything. And I feel for myself that it's extremely important to share and, to be the change I want to see, and to be someone who is very understanding, very open-minded, very empathetic, compassionate, able to approach a situation and have composure, and to approach people even if I disagree with them, or I'm afraid of them, or I hate them, like whatever. I tend to not be very hateful in general, but I choose not to be hateful in general. And there's a very big distinction there, right? And it's hard, man. That's why it's so fucking hard, because it's hard to not be hateful. When people are fucking... when it feels like people are being fucking stupid and being just fucking silly and just like fucking everything up, it feels a lot easier to respond by not caring, by being apathetic, by being hateful back. And that's the thing, man. Like, it's a hard decision, but it's the necessary decision if we want to create real change. And how do we create change? We create change by being the change that we want to see. It all starts with each of us. I'm changing, I'm willing now to voice my thoughts. Over time, I've shifted my half of the equation. My half of the equation is very different from what it was 2 years ago. And I've grown so much as a person, and I come at my relationships with a much different energy, a much different dynamic. And, it's still pretty uncomfortable, still pretty lonely in this sense, besides my relationship. Shout out to my girlfriend, I love you. But, but, like with my friend group, like, I still feel pretty uncomfortable. I still feel pretty misunderstood. I feel pretty uneasy around some of the things they say, some of the beliefs they have, some of the comments they make, but at the same time, what I've realized is like, that's like the surface level, and what I've found is that even the people who are very ignorant, let's say, quote unquote, like ignorant, bigoted, like hateful, like racist, whatever, or on the other end of it, the people who say all these things towards people like that, who ironically, in a sense, become the same thing. They become intolerable of these people, and it just sort of perpetuates this cycle. And what I found is that at the end of the day, everyone's just human, man. I keep making this distinction, but unless you're like a fucking like psychotic lunatic who was like actually born like with a fucked up mind, which is very rare, I feel like most people are just pretty normal, well-meaning, well-intentioned, open-minded, fair people. And I think what really happens isn't that. I think what happens is that they sort of lose that part of them, or they don't present that part of them, because that part of them is really hard to present when your emotions are extremely strong, and when you feel really hurt, really pained, or that you're really suffering about something, or like you really care about something, you're really passionate about something. Like, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be emotional, that people shouldn't care or anything like that. I think that there's a time and place for it, and it's very important to acknowledge them, to process them, to understand them. But I think the step that's lacking in the world right now, at least in the US, which is a fucking wild west. It's a very different dynamic from so much of the world, at least from what I've experienced and what I've traveled to and what I've learned. But every society, every country, none is perfect. No country is perfect. Every country has their problems because in every country we have humans. Humans are in every country. And where there are humans, there are imperfections. Where there are humans, there are problems. And that's probably the human condition. Like we're constantly adapting. There's constantly new things to learn and to grow from, and lessons all that stuff. But I feel like the stage that a lot of people are struggling with is the communication, that like final step of like communication. And also, actually, I think also like the emotions. I feel there's a lot of people that are very anti-emotion. I feel that a lot of my friends, it feels as if they're very anti-emotion. And I feel like as a society, with like the growth, with the rise of like incel and like red pill stuff and like all these things, like it seems like the situation's pretty dire. And like Dr. K talks about this, where like there's a rise in so many negative things, and like our mental health is just fucked. Like as a society in the US, our mental health is fucked. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And I mean, I'm no psychiatrist, I'm no researcher, I'm no this and that. So I won't say too much on it. Don't take it as a grain of salt. But to my understanding, there is an increase, a trend of increased like rates of suicide, rates of depression, rates of like mental disorders, like all these things. And we're fucking, our society's going to shit, man. I don't know what else to say. And it's one thing to like acknowledge that, to acknowledge there's a problem, there's something that we need to change, that needs to be fixed, something that's fundamentally broken. Our fucking school system too, man, like it's just a mess. Like I was a teacher for a year in China. It's very different in some ways, but I feel in its essence, it's the same problems where like in the US, I feel like there's too many students being handled by too few teachers, who have too few resources, who get paid too little, who have too few power to actually enforce rules, and they're not backed up by the administrators. The administrators are too afraid of the parents and too at the will of the fears of the parents and the repercussions and parents coming at them for how teachers handle children. So they're not backing up the teachers. The teachers can't really tackle the students because the administrators are scared of the parents, because the parents won't take responsibility for their children, the students, and they'll bring it up to the school and the administrators. And then the kids aren't afraid of their parents and aren't afraid of the teachers. And like, it's just this huge mess, man. Everything's just, it feels like it's all falling apart. And in a way, well, it feels that way because for one, you have to be really careful. And this is something I've realized, is that when you spend so much time on the internet and reading news and all these things, like you have this perception of the world that's very skewed in the negative direction. Because when you're on the news, like what do we focus on? What gets clicks? Like we focus on the negative shit, the crazy shit. No one would read, I mean some people might. Most people won't read like a cute little positive news story over like an insane, like really negative one, And it kind of skews the perception of the world. And it happens too with spending a lot of time online on the internet, where there's anonymity, and people are able to say shit and just say way worse things than they would ever say in person because they feel there's no consequences. And what sort of happens is we just sort of start to perceive the world in a very negative, pessimistic way. And this is my experience, and part of why I felt the need to leave the US and to travel and to live abroad, and really to realize again that like humans are beautiful. Humans aren't bad, man. As a whole, like, it's not that the world's going to shit. I mean, it certainly feels that way, and that's valid. And it certainly is going to shit in some ways, but the thing is, like, by human nature, we focus on what's really negative, right? We focus on fear. That's part of why it's really hard to, like, get a handle of our mind and our ego, because they're very fear-oriented. They want to avoid pain and suffering and death. We want to survive. So it does what it needs to survive. But the thing is that we're capable too of change and of creating the change you want to see, of being adaptable. And that's what makes humans so beautiful. We can choose what we want to do. And I think if you're not aware and you're not conscious of that process that's going on in your head, you're not going to be the one choosing. You're going to be choosing based on what's happening around you, what your environment is saying, what's happening, how you feel, what other people think, what other people say, all these things. And certainly a lot of problems, certainly a huge mess, certainly something that we might feel powerless in changing. But for one, it's part of why I love traveling, is to just go outside, talk to people, interact with humans, not just online, not just on social media. And you realize that we're not as fucked as we think. We're not as fucked as we feel. We're certainly going in a bad direction in some ways, but we're also going in a good direction in a lot of ways. And we've also made a lot of progress. That's one of the things we never focus on. We always focus on what there's left to do, but never on what we've done and what we have accomplished. Maybe it's just human nature. It definitely is and will be to some extent by biology, but we're very adaptable. We have the power to change and to be decisive, to be intentional and mindful of what we want to do, and that will change who we become and who we are. And that's the journey I'm on right now, baby. I am documenting my thoughts so that I can be aware of the thoughts and I can see for myself and figure out, are these my thoughts? Are these the thoughts of the people around me? The thoughts of social media, the thoughts of influencers, the thoughts of the government? I don't know. Whatever the fuck, man. If we're not aware of what we're thinking, we can't know whether they're our thoughts or if we're just running off the automatic thoughts we've internalized from the outside, externally from other people. So that's basically where I'm at, man. And boy, am I glad that I recorded this video. And that's the thing. I always am glad I recorded this video, but yet my thoughts, my mind, my ego will still be afraid of doing it. And, I think it's not to demonize my mind or my ego. It's just doing what it's trying to do to protect me and thinks it's doing what's best for me. But now it's I try to think of it as my inner child, and it's all right, little bro. Don't worry, don't trip. I got this handled. Little bro grew up. I'm big bro now. And, I hear you. I'm listening to you. I hear that you're afraid. I hear that you're fearful of these things and of these things happening and that these things make you feel uncomfortable or uneasy. And, I think now it's not that inner child, that inner voice is gone. It's just that I'm listening to it. I'm in tune with it. And I'm choosing how to respond. And, a lot of how I had been responding wasn't actually serving me. And it was being done out of fear. And it made sense at the time when those were the habits and the automatic thoughts and feelings and beliefs that I was afraid of and that hurt me and made me suffer and that I didn't want to feel again. But I've grown, man. I've grown, and it's gonna be all right, little bro. A lot has changed, and a lot will continue to change, and I will continue, I want to continue being me here in the now, continue being mindful and thoughtful of who I am now, because that's going to influence myself and who I become in the future. All we need to do is hone on into the now, do our best, make tiny ass changes, because in the grand scheme of things, as time goes on, just those tiny fucking changes will be massive. The consequences of change, the not repercussions, but the impact will be immense, will be very positive. And I've already felt so much of that positive impact just over the past month, and I imagine it's only going to get better from here, baby. Because as I replace those bad habits, those automatic habits and thoughts that don't serve me, with my own intentional thoughts that do serve me and that align with who I want to be, what I value, what I believe, what I care about, what I'm passionate about, what I want to do in the world, or just at least trending in the direction of figuring out all those things and figuring out who I want to be and what I want to do in this world. All that helps, and I'm certainly learning a lot about myself, learning a lot about how I see the world, how I view the world, how I want to see the world, how I want to view the world, what I will choose to believe, how I will act, and who I shall become. So yeah, with that, I'm feeling pretty freaking good of my my impact here, my blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Feeling good about my actions today, my decisions today. Every moment fucking matters, man. Take advantage. Do your best. Trust yourself. Be honest with yourself and just do your best. That's all you can do. You can't do more than your best. Just do your fucking best. Lower your fucking expectations. A lot of us were fucking ourselves just by having huge expectations. It's understandable. The past is in the past. You made your mistakes. You fucked up. It's okay. You can't change it. Focus on what you can control, not on what you cannot. And let's focus the fuck up, man. Let's fucking go, man. Let's focus the fuck up. Let's be the change you want to see. Let's fucking go, man. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling that fire. That spark's coming back. And I imagine over time, it's only going to get better and more powerful. And I'll only continue to grow stronger and grow more as myself, into my flesh, into my body. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I got distracted by a crazy dude that's hollering to the left of me. Oh, and I have some bad heartburn. I'm gonna go home. I think I'm gonna set up my OBS, which is like a streaming service, and I want to try playing some League of Legends and being very communicative and very positive, shifting how I approach the equation. Because when I used to play League, I came into it honestly very like afraid and anxious and like insecure, and I would remember feeling like very poorly and just, I don't know, man, that's something I need to get into another time for sure. But, or I guess I could get into it now. Like I remember used to play League and I would like play ranked and I would just be really afraid of like people like shitting on me or like flaming me and stuff like that. And that was just a little bro. That was just inner child feeling sad and feeling afraid, man. It is what it is. It's okay. But, you know, I feel like so much has changed since then. And I really want to see, I don't want to like, I don't think I want to sink too many hours into playing League. I think it could work if I don't do it just for myself, but, you know, I feel like it would be fulfilling if I have a user base and I can just be myself, be honest, be authentic, and just like be a positive role model for others and stuff like that. Like I do feel like I do feel that it could be very enjoyable and very fulfilling to play some League of Legends and live stream it and document it for the world to see and for people to join me. I've been playing with my friend over the past couple of days, and we have had some people drop into the chat, which has been an interesting experience. And a dynamic I'm not used to, and a dynamic that definitely made me feel a little uncomfortable and uneasy, you know, having someone like there in real time. It's as if like if I did these, but as a live stream, that would certainly shift the dynamic and you know, make it a little more uneasy, a little more real. Like if I had to do this, what I'm doing now in front of like 1 million people, sheesh, dude, that'd be pretty scary. But that's what I want to be able to do. I want to reach a point where it doesn't matter how many people are in front of me, I can still be me, I can still be authentic, I can still be genuine, and I can still be the person I want to be. That is the dream right there, baby. And we're fast approaching. So with that, I am gonna, I think, try some live streaming. And I don't know, see what happens. That is all for me. Thank you for watching. And do me a favor by taking care of yourself. Alright, I'm going crazy. Which is good. It's good. It's good to be crazy. It's what makes life interesting. Alright, I'm done rambling. Thank you for watching. Take care. Peace.